In 2015, Hungary was at the center of Europe's migrant crisis. By 2017, it was being hailed by some as a model for border control. But what changed in those 2 years, and at what cost? However, in 2015, the migrant crisis reached its peak, with the breaking record of over 177,000 asylum applications in a single year. The overwhelming surge pushed Hungary's resources and border control capacities to their limits. The crisis was driven by the ongoing Syrian civil war and conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, forcing large numbers of people to flee towards Europe in search of safety and opportunity. However, Europe's initial response was divided, with Germany adopting an open-door policy. Hungary, however, grew increasingly concerned about the impact on its national security and identity.
First, just to clarify the position of Hungary on migration. It's true that the number of migrants in Hungary is zero.
The country found itself torn between wanting to help people in need and protecting itself. This led Hungary to deal with the problem in ways that many people disagreed with. During a time when many people were trying to enter Europe, Hungary became a center of attention and disagreement. Viktor Orban, who had been leading Hungary since 2010, was in charge of how the country handled this situation. Orban, who strongly believed in putting his country first, saw the arrival of many newcomers as a big problem. He thought these newcomers might change Hungary's culture and way of life, and even put the country in danger. Here's a simpler version of that information. Orban's government talked about the situation in a very serious way. They said the newcomers, who were mostly Muslim, could harm Hungary's Christian culture and European way of life. Many Hungarians agreed with this idea because they were worried about big changes in their society and possible dangers from having so many new people arrive at once. Hungary then took quick and strong actions. The most noticeable and argued about thing they did was build a big fence. In July 2015, they started putting up a fence that was 4 meters, about 13 feet, high along the border with Serbia, which is 175 kilometers. Hungary also made new laws to discourage people from entering the country illegally. They made it a crime to cross the border illegally or damage the fence, with punishments like jail time or being sent back. But many other countries, especially in Europe, strongly disagreed. They said Hungary was being cruel and not following European ideas about helping others and respecting human rights. The United Nations, which tries to help refugees, said Hungary might be breaking international laws about how to treat people seeking safety. Even when others criticized them, Orban and his government didn't change their minds. They used strong words to explain their actions, saying they had to choose between keeping Hungary's Christian culture or letting it be invaded by Muslims. This kind of talk upset some people, but many Hungarians agreed because they were scared of big changes happening too fast. Orban knew how to push people's buttons. He talked a lot about being proud to be Hungarian and warned about outsiders coming in. He made it sound like Hungary was protecting Europe from lots of immigrants who might use up the country's money and change how things work there. Orban's government used TV, radio, and big signs to keep telling people this story over and over. Orban's message really worked on a lot of people. Many Hungarians started agreeing with his tough ideas about immigrants. When election time came in 2018, Orban won again, mostly because people liked what he said about keeping immigrants out. Hungary didn't want to do what the rest of Europe was doing about immigrants. While other countries were talking about sharing the load and taking in certain numbers of people, Hungary just said no and closed its borders. This made things tricky for the European Union. It changed where immigrants tried to go, and it showed that not all countries in Europe agreed on how to handle the situation. Hungary didn't stop with just one fence. When people started trying to come in through different ways, Hungary built more fences. They ended up with fences covering over 300 miles of their borders. These weren't just simple fences either. They had fancy cameras that could see in the dark and sensors that could tell if someone was trying to cross. Building walls to keep people out isn't a new idea. It's been done before in places like Berlin, between Israel and the West Bank, and between the US and Mexico. But Hungary's fence was different because it was in modern Europe, where most countries were trying to keep borders open. The fence worked really well at keeping people out. Before it was built, over 100,000 people were crossing into Hungary illegally each month. After the fence went up, that number dropped to just a few hundred. By 2017, instead of thousands of people trying to cross every day, it was down to less than 10. Hungary's government was really proud of how well the fence worked. Prime Minister Orban said they had stopped a migrant invasion and protected not just Hungary, but all of Europe. They said the fence didn't just stop people from crossing, but also made many give up, trying to enter Hungary at all. But not everyone thought the fence was a good idea. Groups that help refugees were really worried. They said the fence, along with Hungary's stricter laws, made it almost impossible for people running from war or danger to get help, even though international laws say these people should be protected. Some people said Hungarian border guards were being too rough with migrants trying to cross. There were worries that the fence might force people to try more dangerous ways to get into Europe, maybe even dealing with criminals who smuggle people. Others wondered if building fences was really a good long-term plan. They said that while fences might work for a while, they don't solve the big reasons why people leave their homes in the first place. Things like war, being poor, or climate change making it hard to live in some places. As long as these problems exist, people will keep trying to find better places to live. This whole situation made people ask a big question. In today's world, are fences and walls the right way to deal with lots of people moving between countries? Some say yes, it's needed to protect countries. Others say no, it's old-fashioned, and we need to find kinder ways to help people and solve the real problems. Hungary didn't just build fences to keep migrants out. They also changed their laws to make it much harder for people to ask for asylum. That's when you ask a country to let you stay because it's dangerous in your home country. In 2015, Hungary's government made some big changes to their rules about asylum. These new rules made it really tough for migrants to be officially called refugees in Hungary. One big change was setting up special areas called transit zones along the border. People who wanted asylum had to wait in these areas while Hungary decided if they could stay. Some people said these areas were basically like jails, and that people waiting there didn't get enough help or basic things they needed. Hungary also used an idea called safe third countries. This means that if someone passes through a country that's considered safe before they get to Hungary, Hungary can say no to their asylum request. The Hungarian government says a tighter border control is good for the economy. They think it will make the country safer, which could bring in more foreign businesses. Prime Minister Viktor Orban claims that being tough on immigration has already made more international companies interested in Hungary. But the money side of things isn't so simple. Stricter borders cost a lot up front, and it's hard to tell if they'll pay off in the long run. Some experts worry that Hungary might face problems in the future because it doesn't have enough young workers. The country's population is getting older, and not many babies are being born. Hungary isn't the only country in Europe with this problem, but it's handling it differently. For example, Germany is more open to immigrants because they see them as a way to fill jobs as their own population ages. By 2020, Hungary was expected to have 12% fewer working age people than in 2015. This could cause issues with pensions and make it harder for the country to produce as much. Instead of relying on immigrants, the Hungarian government tried to solve their worker shortage by encouraging Hungarians to have more babies. They offered things like tax breaks and help with housing for couples who have kids. While many Hungarians like these ideas, some experts weren't sure if this would be enough to fix the problem of not having enough workers in important jobs. Hungary's tough stand on immigration caused some trouble with the European Union, which gives Hungary a lot of financial help. Hungary refused to take in refugees as part of an EU plan, which led to arguments and threats of fines. This made people wonder if Hungary might lose some EU money because of its immigration policies. Even with these problems, Hungary's economy did pretty well after they tightened immigration rules. The country's overall wealth grew and fewer people were unemployed. The government said this was partly because their immigration policy made the country stable and good for business. But some types of work, especially farming and building, had trouble finding enough workers. These jobs used to be done by immigrants, came for short periods, and now it was harder to fill these positions. Some businesses dealt with this by using more machines or paying higher wages to attract Hungarian workers, while others struggled to get everything done. When COVID-19 hit in 2020, it made things even more complicated. The pandemic temporarily reduced the number of people trying to move to other countries, but it also showed how important it is for a country to be able to quickly adjust who works where. As countries around the world started rethinking their immigration rules because of the pandemic, people took a fresh look at how Hungary was handling things. Hungary's tough immigration rules changed more than just who could enter the country. They affected how people lived and thought about being Hungarian. While the government was pushing for a strong Hungarian identity, some groups who had lived in Hungary for a long time, like Roma people, and Jewish communities started feeling left out. They worried that the government's focus on everyone being the same culturally didn't leave much room for different kinds of people in Hungary. People argued a lot about whether Hungary's tough immigration rules were good or bad for society. Some people said these rules were making Hungarians afraid of foreigners and less accepting of people who were different. There were more reports of people being mean to or even attacking foreigners or anyone who didn't seem Hungarian. Some people also worried that Hungary might be losing out on new and interesting cultural ideas. They said that throughout history, Hungary had been influenced by many different cultures, and this had made the country richer in many ways. These folks thought that not letting in new people and ideas might make Hungarian culture get stuck in the past and not grow. Looking to the future, some experts were concerned about what might happen to Hungary if it kept limiting immigration. They predicted that Hungary's population would keep getting older and smaller without new people coming in. This could cause problems for things like pensions and healthcare. Some worried that young Hungarians might leave the country to find jobs in places that were more open to different kinds of people and ideas. People who agreed with the government's policies had different views. They said these policies were keeping Hungarian society together and preserving its culture. They worried that if too many people from other countries came in too quickly, it could cause problems and change Hungarian values. The debate about Hungary's approach to immigration wasn't just happening in Hungary. Other countries in Central and Eastern Europe were watching closely, wondering if they should do something similar to protect their own cultures. This led to big discussions about what it means to be European and how countries can keep their own identity while still being part of the European Union. As time went on, people started asking important questions about Hungary's policies. Would focusing so much on keeping Hungarian culture the same actually bring people together, or would it just cut Hungary off from the rest of the world? Would these policies limit opportunities for Hungarians in the long run? Could Hungary keep being strict about immigration and still play an active role in Europe, which is becoming more and more connected? These are complex questions without easy answers. Different people have different opinions based on what they think is most important for Hungary's future. When lots of people started coming to Europe as refugees, Hungary took a really tough stance on immigration. This not only changed things inside Hungary, but also led to a big fight with the European Union, EU. As more and more refugees arrived, the EU wanted all its countries to work together. They came up with a plan to share refugees among different countries, so places like Greece and Italy wouldn't have to handle everything on their own. But Hungary's leader, Viktor Orban, really didn't like this idea. He said it would mess with Hungary's culture and that the EU shouldn't force countries to take in refugees. Hungary even went to court with Slovakia to try and stop this plan. It was just the start of a long battle between Hungary and the EU. The EU got worried that Hungary wasn't following the rules and started legal action against them. They were concerned about how Hungary was treating refugees and punishing people who tried to help immigrants. In 2017, the EU court said Hungary had to follow the refugee sharing plan, but Hungary still refused to take in refugees and kept its strict rules about who could come into the country. All of this shows how one country's tough stance on immigration can cause big problems with other countries and organizations. It's a complicated issue that affects many people and doesn't have easy solutions. Things got even more heated in 2018 when Hungary passed a law they called Stop Soros. This law was named after George Soros, a rich guy who Orban's government said was encouraging too many immigrants to come to Hungary. The new law made it illegal to help immigrants who didn't have the right paperwork. A lot of people who care about human rights and officials from the EU thought this law was really unfair and went against people's basic rights. The EU was so upset about how Hungary was treating refugees that they took the country to court. They said Hungary was breaking EU rules by keeping asylum seekers in special zones, making it hard for people to ask for asylum, and not treating rejected asylum seekers properly.